Rooted Readiness, Episode 1, When the Lights Went Quiet. A Cascading Infrastructure Failure, featuring Rachel Sinclair and Shelby, an Eddie's on the Move production. My name is Rachel Sinclair. I have spent 25 years studying how systems fail. I am a management consultant by profession, a full-time RVer by choice, and a woman who has learned that the distance between everything is fine and nothing works is shorter than most people think. My co-pilot is Shelby, a Staffordshire Bull Terrier with better instincts than half the executives I have advised. Between the two of us, we have logged more highway miles than I can count, and more campground sunrises than I have bothered to photograph. Everything I am about to do in the next 7 days, I learned by living my ordinary life. I did not train for a crisis. I trained for Tuesday, for the Wednesday when the campground loses water pressure, for the Thursday when the cell signal disappears and a client deliverable is due by 5. I built habits because habits make a solo life on the road sustainable. And it turns out that what makes a life sustainable is exactly what makes a life survivable. If you are listening to this and thinking that my life looks nothing like yours, you are probably right. But the principles are the same. You already maintain systems. You already depend on infrastructure you did not build and cannot control. The only question is whether you have looked at those dependencies clearly and asked yourself what happens when one of them stops working. You do not need my rig or my career or my particular set of experiences to answer that question. You just need the willingness to ask it and the honesty to sit with whatever comes back. This is the story of the week that tested every system I had built and every assumption I had made about what it means to be prepared. It begins the way most important stories do, quietly, by paying attention. My mother used to say that the best mornings are the ones nobody remembers. No drama, no surprises, just coffee, quiet, and the dog pretending she does not want the last bite of your toast. This was one of those mornings. I should have paid closer attention to how good it felt. I walked Shelby at 6:15 along the perimeter of the RV park, same as every morning. The air had that late autumn sharpness to it, the kind that wakes you up faster than caffeine and smells like wood smoke and the last of somebody's campfire from the night before. She took her time at every fence post. I let her. Neither of us had anywhere urgent to be. Back inside the rig, the coffee was ready. I had set the timer the night before because I'm a woman who respects the sanctity of the first cup. I poured it, checked the external camera feeds on my tablet out of habit, and settled into my workstation. 2 screens, a solid satellite lock on the Meridian dish, and a risk assessment for a mid-tier manufacturing client that was due by end of week. The client had a procurement dependency they had not stress-tested. I had been turning it over in my mind for 2 days, the way I turn over everything. Slowly, from multiple angles, waiting for the pattern to announce itself. Shelby took her spot on the floor mat by the passenger seat. She circled twice, dropped, and let out the sigh of a dog who considers the morning's patrol complete and the results satisfactory. I sent 2 emails, opened the assessment file, and started writing. The Meridian connection was clean. The rig was level and quiet. Outside the windshield, the RV park sat in that particular stillness that small towns produce on cold mornings when nobody is in a hurry. The Tahoe was parked alongside, right where I had left it. The electric bike was stowed in the exterior compartment. Everything was where it belonged. It was the kind of morning that makes you believe the world will keep working exactly this way. I have learned not to take that personally when it doesn't. I took the electric bike into town around 10. The rig stays parked when I am running errands. 40 feet of diesel pusher is not what you bring to a coffee run. On the ride in, I passed the gas station on the county road. The price sign was dark, not displaying a new price, not cycling between grades, just off. A blank face where numbers should be. I noted it the way I note everything. Filed it, kept pedaling. The coffee shop was a place I'd been using as a secondary workspace when I wanted a change of scenery and a pastry that somebody else baked. Good coffee, decent Wi-Fi, and owner who did not hover. I ordered, set up at my usual table, and opened my laptop. The Wi-Fi dropped twice in 20 minutes. I watched the owner restart the router with the practiced frustration of someone who has done this 4 times today and is running out of patience with the explanation she keeps giving customers. I did not ask her about it. I just watched. On my phone, my client's email server was bouncing messages with a lag I had not seen from them before. I tried texting my contact at the firm. The message sat on sending for 30 seconds before it went through. 30 seconds is a long time when you are watching a progress bar and thinking about what it means. On the ride back, I stopped at the gas station. The price sign was still dark, and now the card reader was down. The attendant was a young man, early 20s, with the expression of someone delivering the same line for the 6th time. Cash only. Been happening all morning. He shrugged like it was the weather. I did not need fuel for the bike, but I made a mental note to top off the Tahoe while cash transactions were still being accepted. That thought arrived fully formed, without hesitation, and I let it sit without examining it too closely. Some instincts earn the right to speak first and explain later. Card readers fail, Wi-Fi drops, email servers lag. Any one of those is a Tuesday. All 3 before lunch is a data set. I did not know what it meant yet, but I filed it where I file everything that does not add up, in the part of my brain that does not believe in coincidences. Over the next 36 hours, the failures multiplied. Each one stayed individually explainable. That is how infrastructure stress works. It gives you an alibi for every symptom until the symptoms stop needing alibis. The grocery store's inventory system went offline. The shelves still looked mostly normal if you were not paying attention, but I was paying attention. The produce section had gaps that a well-run store would not tolerate. The kind of gaps that mean the supply truck was late or short or both. Nobody had put up a sign. They were just rearranging what remained so the shelves looked full from a distance. I have seen executives do the same thing with quarterly reports. At the RV park, the manager stopped by to mention inconsistent water pressure. She said it the way people say things they want to believe are temporary. Casually, with a half smile, like the universe owes them a quick resolution. I thanked her and added it to the list I was keeping in my head. I checked my phone. 2 of the 3 cell carriers in the area showed degraded service. Mine was still holding, but the margins were thinner than yesterday. The Meridian satellite internet was still operational, but latency had increased. That registered differently than the cell tower degradation. Meridian runs on LEO satellites. If it was lagging, the problem was not limited to local terrestrial infrastructure. The stress had a higher altitude than I had been assuming. The local AM radio station ran normal programming most of the day, but the national news segments had a quality I recognized from my work. I have sat in boardrooms where executives talked around a subject they were not yet authorized to name. The anchors had that same careful choreography, that same disciplined vagueness. I caught the phrase regional service disruptions used 3 times in a single broadcast without a single specific detail to support it. 3 times is not reporting. 3 times is messaging. That night, the power flickered twice, short, quick. The kind of flicker most people register as an annoyance and forget by morning. Shelby lifted her head both times and stared at me with an expression that had nothing to do with the lights and everything to do with what my body had just told her. She was not reacting to the flicker. She was reacting to me reacting to the flicker. I keep forgetting how precisely she reads the room being me. I checked the external camera feeds. The park was quiet. I checked the solar generators and power banks, fully charged from the shore power connection, which is exactly what shore power is for. The panels were stowed. No reason to deploy them when you are plugged into a reliable source. But I knew where they were, and I knew they worked. I had 4 ways to recharge them and a 4-week food supply that required no immediate resupply. I ran through them mentally, the way you run through a checklist when you want to know exactly where you stand. Panels: RV alternator charger, Tahoe alternator charger, dual fuel generator, 4 pathways to the same essential resource. No single point of failure. I was not scared. I want to be clear about that. Fear is a signal, and I respect it when it arrives. But this was not fear. This was the feeling I get when I am sitting in a client's conference room and the data starts forming a shape I recognize. The shape is never good. But seeing it clearly is always better than not seeing it at all. Here is what 25 years of pattern recognition teaches you. The individual data points do not tell you anything. It is the relationship between them that speaks. And right now, every system I could see was telling the same story from a different angle. I just was not sure yet what chapter we were in. 2 days after the first anomalies, I was at my workstation before dawn, running a power consumption projection on the laptop, when the Meridian connection dropped. Not degraded, not slow, gone. I stared at the indicator on the dish interface for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 because I timed it. Timing things is what I do when I cannot control them. It came back at reduced speed, maybe 40% of normal throughput. Enough to send a message, not enough to pretend everything was fine. The Meridian outage changed my calculus. Cell towers going down is local. Satellite internet degrading is atmospheric, orbital, systemic. It means the problem is not just under my feet. It is above my head. And when the infrastructure above your head starts stuttering, you are running out of floor to stand on. I opened the Trucker's Atlas on the dining table. I had not opened it since I arrived at this park 3 weeks ago. It is the kind of book that feels heavier than its weight when you are opening it for the reasons I was opening it. I spread it flat and started looking at routes south. Not planning, not yet, just looking. Giving my hands something to do while my mind worked the problem. I pulled out the Spot device and sent a check-in message to 2 contacts. The first was a former colleague in Atlanta, a woman I had worked with on 3 engagements and trusted with the kind of trust that gets built in conference rooms at 2 in the morning when the client's problem is worse than anyone thought and you need someone who will not panic. The second was a fellow full-timer, a nomad currently somewhere in East Tennessee, a woman I had met at a campground 2 years ago and stayed in touch with because she was competent and honest, which is a combination I do not encounter as often as I would like. I sent each of them the same message, my coordinates and a single line. Checking in, how are things where you are? I tried my cell phone next. Service was intermittent. The call connected, held for 4 seconds of silence, and dropped. I did not try again. Around 9, the RV park manager stopped by. She mentioned, conversationally, that the town's main water treatment facility had lost power overnight and was running on backup generators. She said it the way you tell someone an interesting fact about the local infrastructure, something to chat about while you are both standing in the cold. She did not seem alarmed. The RV park still had power. Most of the town still had power, but I knew what she was telling me without knowing she was telling me it. Small towns run on radial distribution. Different parts of town sit on different feeder lines. A water treatment plant is one of the heaviest electrical draws in a municipality, and when a grid is under stress, the highest draw facilities are the first to trip. The rest of town stays lit because the utility is shedding load to keep residential circuits alive. The treatment plant drops first because it pulls the most current, and it drops onto its own backup generators, and nobody in the RV park notices because they are on a different circuit. I heard it as a countdown. Backup generators run on fuel. Fuel runs out. When the water treatment plant's fuel runs out, the water stops being treated. That is not a plumbing problem. That is a public health collapse with a timeline. I drove the Tahoe to the gas station. The price sign was still dark. A handwritten cardboard sign in the window read, cash only. I topped off the tank. Then I filled the 8-gallon reserve container from the pump, paid cash for everything, and drove to the grocery store. I purchased shelf-stable items with a deliberation that probably looked unremarkable to anyone watching. Canned protein, dried beans, rice, peanut butter, powdered milk, a case of bottled water. I was not hoarding. I was extending my 4-week supply with additional margin. There is a difference, and the difference matters to me. I paid cash. I did not rush. I did not explain. There is a window between I think something is wrong and I know something is wrong. Most people wait for certainty. By the time certainty arrives, the window is closed. I have watched companies die in that window. I was not going to join them. Back at the rig, I walked through every system I owned the way I walk through a client's operation. Every system, every input, every dependency, every redundancy, no assumptions, no shortcuts, just the facts and a notebook, not the laptop. The notebook, paper and pen. Because paper does not need a network, does not need a charge, and does not become a useless rectangle when the satellites go quiet. Diesel. The RV's main tank was at 3/4 from the drive-in. I had not moved the rig since arrival so that fuel was banked. The 8-gallon reserve container I had just filled sat in the Tahoe's cargo area. The Tahoe itself was topped off. Between the three, I had the range to relocate if I needed to. Not unlimited range, but enough to be deliberate about where I went rather than desperate about getting there. Water. Fresh tank was full. I had topped it off the day before, a standard practice. When you are connected to hookup water, you use the hookup, but you keep the onboard tank full so that when you disconnect, you are already carrying your own supply. The backup filtration system was stowed in the exterior compartment, tested last month, operational. If I needed to source water from a natural body, I could make it drinkable. That is not a luxury. It is a capability I purchased, learned to use, and maintained. There is a difference between owning a tool and being able to operate it under pressure, and I have no patience for the former without the latter. Food. The 4-week rolling supply was intact. I reorganized it in my head, which I would formalize later at the new position. 4 weeks of balanced nutrition, maintained as standard practice by a woman who works remotely in places where the nearest grocery store is often an hour away. Plus the supplementary shelf-stable items from this morning's run. Call it 5 weeks if I was disciplined. I am always disciplined. Power. Solar generator bank fully charged, portable panels stowed and accessible, 1,200 watts of collection capacity ready for deployment. The dual-fuel generator had been tested and was operational, propane and gasoline, with both propane cylinders full. The RV's alternator charger and the Tahoe's alternator charger were both confirmed functional on the last drives. 4 independent pathways to charged batteries. I could lose any one of them and still keep the lights on. Lose 2, and I would have to budget more carefully, but I would manage. Lose 3, and we were in a different conversation. But 3 simultaneous failures across independent systems was a scenario I filed under unlikely and moved on. Communications. Meridian intermittent but functional at reduced speed. Cell service degraded and unreliable. Spot device operational on its own satellite network, independent of both. The Spot was my lifeline to the 2 people I had just messaged. It did not need cell towers. It did not need Meridian. It needed line of sight to the sky, and the sky was still there. Security. External camera system was online via the rig's internal Wi-Fi, all 4 angles feeding to my tablet. The low-tech perimeter materials were in an exterior compartment, ready for deployment when I reached a position where I intended to stay. Paracord, small bells. Not sophisticated. Did not need to be. It needed to wake Shelby, and Shelby needed to wake me. Shelby's supplies, food, medications, water bowl, leash, carrier, all accounted for. She watched me go through the inventory with the expression of a dog who has seen this process before and considers it acceptable but not particularly interesting. I wrote it all down, every number, every status, every gap. Then I closed the notebook and sat with what I had. The answers were better than most people's, but better than most is not the same as enough. And the difference between those two things is where the real decisions live. The trucker's atlas was open on the dining table. My notebook was beside it. Shelby was watching me from the floor mat, and I could feel her attention like a hand on my shoulder. Dogs know when you are making a decision that changes things. They cannot read maps, but they can read you, and right now, I was legible. I traced routes with my finger, south and slightly west, looking for a specific kind of location. I needed water access. I needed terrain that did not invite casual visitors. I needed to be close enough to a town for occasional resupply, but far enough away to be inconspicuous. I needed a road that could handle a 40-foot rig with a tow vehicle, which meant no low bridges, no weight-restricted roads, no tight switchbacks that looked manageable on a map and turned into a nightmare at ground level. The trucker's atlas is the tool most people do not know they need until they are navigating without GPS. It gives you what a screen never will. Low bridge clearances, weight restrictions, roads that are unsuitable for large vehicles, and the kind of overview that lets you see the whole route at once rather than following a blue line one turn at a time. I bought mine because I drive a 40-foot rig, and I do not trust any single navigation system to keep me out of trouble. That purchase had nothing to do with anticipating the end of satellites. It had everything to do with being a professional who operates heavy equipment and takes that responsibility seriously. I found what I was looking for roughly 40 miles south, a Corps of Engineers campground near a reservoir, pull-through sites, widely spaced lots, seasonal, which meant most of the recreational campers would have cleared out by late autumn, water access from the reservoir, tree lines for concealment, and a route that avoided every bridge and weight restriction that would stop my rig. I marked it in the atlas with a pencil. Then I sat with the decision. I did not want to leave. I want to name that clearly because the calculus is not just logistical. The RV park was comfortable. The owner was decent. The town had been good to me. I had a hookup site with reliable water, easy electric, and a cell signal that used to work. 3 weeks of settling in had made it feel like mine, the way any place feels like yours when you have arranged your coffee maker and your dog knows which direction to walk in the morning. But comfortable is not the same as strategic. And the systems that made this park comfortable were the same systems that were failing. The hookup water came from a treatment plant running on backup generators. The electric came from a grid that had flickered twice in one night. The cell signal that used to work no longer did. I was parked on top of dependencies I did not control, and every one of them was degrading. The window is not a window. It is a door, and it only swings one direction. Once it closes behind you, you do not get to go back and grab what you forgot. I looked at the park, the hookups, the easy water, the decent cell signal that used to work. Then I looked at the atlas. The atlas was honest with me. The park was telling me what I wanted to hear. I started my departure preparation that afternoon, disconnected the Meridian dish and secured it for transit, stowed the electric bike in the exterior compartment, ran the pre-drive checklist for a 40-foot diesel pusher, which is a document I created myself over years of solo operation and which I treat with the same respect a pilot gives a pre-flight. Tires, fluids, slide retraction, clearances, mirrors, brake lights, hitch connections, every item confirmed, every system verified. Moving a rig this size is not something you do casually, and moving it under uncertain conditions is not something you do without confirming that the machine is ready for whatever the road asks of it. That evening, I walked to the park office and settled my account in cash. The manager counted the bills slowly, and I noticed her hands were not quite steady. She was not frightened, not yet. But her body knew something her words had not caught up with. She thanked me and said she hoped I would come back when things settled down. I told her I hoped so too. I meant it. There is a particular kind of weight to paying what you owe when you suspect the systems that process payments may not be operating much longer. It would have been easy to leave. She might not have noticed for days. But I have never been the kind of woman who lets infrastructure failure become permission to abandon the small agreements that hold a life together. You pay what you owe. You settle what you started. You leave a place the way you want to be remembered in it. I pulled out of the RV park at dawn the next morning. The Tahoe was in tow. Shelby was in the passenger seat, watching the windshield with that particular alertness she gets when we are moving with purpose rather than leisure. She knows the difference. I have never figured out how, but she does. I did not say goodbye to anyone, not because I am unfriendly, because I did not want to explain what I saw. Explanations require evidence that other people find persuasive, and the evidence I was acting on was the kind that only persuades you if you have spent 25 years learning to read it. To anyone else, I was a woman leaving a perfectly good campsite on a cold morning for no apparent reason. To me, I was a woman who recognized the sound of a door beginning to close and chose to walk through it while it was still open. The Corps of Engineers campground sat against a low ridge above the reservoir, exactly where the atlas said it would be. I pulled in mid-morning, diesel engine idling in that deep, patient rumble that 40-foot rigs make when they are waiting for you to decide where to put them. The entrance gate was open and unmanned. The self-registration kiosk had a handwritten note taped over the payment slot. System offline, self-register, honor payment. An Iron Ranger stood beside it, the heavy metal box bolted to a post where you drop your fee envelope. A few crumpled envelopes sat inside, visible through the slot. Somebody before me had done the right thing too. I filled out a registration slip, wrote my site number, my dates, printed my name, folded cash into the envelope and dropped it in. Nobody was checking. Nobody was enforcing. The system that would normally process this transaction had already started to fail, and the person whose job it was to sit in that booth and collect fees was not there. I do not know where they were. I hope they were somewhere safe. But I believe in honoring agreements with institutions even when the institutions are struggling to hold up their end. That is not naivety. It is a line I draw for myself, and I keep it drawn even when nobody is watching. The campground was mostly empty. Late autumn had done its work, clearing out the families and the weekend warriors and the couples with the matching camp chairs. What remained was sparse and spread out. A fifth wheel with a retired couple's sticker collection covering the back panel like a patchwork autobiography. A pop-up camper 2 rows over that looked unoccupied, awning retracted, no vehicle alongside. A Class C about 200 yards to the east with curtains drawn. I cataloged them the way I catalog everything. Data, not judgment, not yet. I chose my site with care. Pull-through lot, backed against the tree line, with clear sight lines to the campground entrance and walking distance to the reservoir. The tree line gave me a wall at my back. The sight lines gave me time to assess anything coming in. The pull-through meant I could leave without the 15-minute ordeal of backing a 40-foot rig with a tow vehicle out of a dead-end site while under pressure. That is not paranoia. That is an exit strategy, and exit strategies are what keep options alive. I leveled the rig, deployed the slides, and did a perimeter walk with Shelby before unhitching the Tahoe. She worked the tree line with her nose to the ground, systematic and thorough, the way she always does in a new location. I let her take her time. Her assessment of the immediate environment has never steered me wrong, and I was not going to start dismissing her data now. I have been parking rigs for years. This was the first time I parked one like I meant to stay and like I might need to leave in a hurry, and those are 2 different calculations, and you have to satisfy both. I gave myself one day to turn this campsite into something I could hold. Not a fortress, a foothold. A place where I controlled the variables I could control and had eyes on the ones I could not. Power first, because power feeds everything else. I connected to the campground's electrical pedestal, which was still live. Shore power is shore power. You use it while it is available. I ran a charging cord from the pedestal to the solar generators in their locked exterior compartment. They did not need to come out. They needed to be full. 100 pounds of lithium battery is not something you wrestle out of a compartment for display. And it is not something you want visible to anyone taking inventory of what their neighbors have. I topped them off from shore power, confirmed the connections, and left them where they were. If the grid dropped overnight, I could engage them from inside the rig. House batteries would carry the 12-volt systems regardless. If I needed AC, the transfer was manual, but it was quick, and I did not need to step outside to make it happen. The portable panels stayed stowed. The dual-fuel generator had been tested and confirmed at the last site. Both propane cylinders were full. The gasoline option was available if I needed it. Everything was ready. None of it needed to be visible. I have clients who depend on me to deliver regardless of my circumstances. An executive risk assessment does not wait for the power to come back on. Neither do deadlines. My systems exist so that my professional obligations are never at the mercy of someone else's infrastructure. That is not anxiety. That is what 25 years of keeping promises looks like when your office has wheels. Food next. I pulled everything out of the pantry and the supplementary supplies from the grocery run and reorganized the entire stock into weekly blocks. Each block self-contained, balanced in nutrition, and labeled. Week 1 was open for current consumption. Weeks 2 through 4 were reserve, and they stayed sealed until the week before them was exhausted. This is not complicated. It is the kind of discipline that feels unnecessary when the store is 3 miles away and becomes the difference between stability and desperation when the store is no longer restocking. Water. My onboard fresh tank was full. The backup filtration system was tested and stowed within reach. I walked the path to the reservoir with Shelby that afternoon, noting the terrain, the grade, the concealment along the route. The reservoir was roughly 300 yards through the tree line, accessible but not visible from the campsite. If I needed to source water, I could get there and back without being on a road. I filed the route in my memory and in my notebook. Security. I connected the external camera system to the rig's internal Wi-Fi and confirmed all 4 angles were live on my tablet. Front approach, rear tree line, driver side, passenger side. The feeds were clear and the motion alerts were functional. That was the primary system. Then I set up the secondary. I strung paracord at ankle height between trees at the 3 ground-level approaches to my site, threaded with small bells. The 4th approach was the tree line at my back, which was dense enough to slow anyone moving through it, and Shelby's hearing would cover what the bells could not. It is not sophisticated. It does not need to be. It needs to function at 3 in the morning when I am asleep and the cameras might be down, and the only thing standing between me and a surprise is 30 feet of paracord and a staffy with exceptional hearing. Communications. The Meridian dish went back up. Service was spotty but present. I checked the spot device and found 2 messages waiting. The first was from my contact in Atlanta. Things are strange here, stay safe. That told me what I needed to know about the geographic scope of whatever this was. Atlanta is not a small town with aging infrastructure. If things were strange in Atlanta, this was not regional. The second message was from the Nomad in Tennessee. Moving south, we'll check in Tuesday. Brief, competent, no panic. Exactly the kind of communication I expected from her. I replied to both with my new coordinates and 3 words. Set up here. By sundown, the cameras were live, the perimeter was set, the food was organized, and the power budget was balanced. Shelby approved. She always knows when we are settled somewhere that matters. She took her spot on the mat, circled once instead of twice, and went to sleep with the particular depth of a dog who has decided the perimeter is secure. I trusted her assessment. I usually do. I built a small fire in the campground ring that evening, kept it low and fed it dry hardwood, the kind that burns clean without throwing a column of smoke. Habit, not necessity. I have been building campfires for most of my adult life, and at some point the practice became its own kind of muscle memory. You learn what burns clean, what throws sparks, what smells like you are announcing your presence to everyone downwind. Shelby lay beside my chair, nose working the air the way it does when the world is full of new information. I sat and listened. That is all. I sat and listened to what the night had to say. No traffic on the distant highway. I could usually hear the trucks at night from this kind of distance, that low Doppler moan of an 18-wheeler moving through the dark. Nothing. No aircraft overhead. I tilted my head back and looked at an empty sky. No blinking lights. No contrails. Just stars. More of them than I had seen in months. Because whatever light pollution the region had been generating was quieter now. The AM radio picked up 2 stations. One was running emergency broadcast tones, followed by instructions to shelter in place, maintain water reserves, and avoid unnecessary travel. I had already done all of those things, which was either reassuring or unsettling, depending on how I wanted to read it. The other station was playing music, jazz. Something slow and clean, with a piano line that sounded like it belonged in a different century. The DJ did not speak between songs. That somehow felt more unsettling than the emergency broadcast. The emergency broadcast was the government talking. The jazz station was a human being sitting in a booth choosing to play beautiful music into a world that might not be listening, and I did not know whether that was courage or denial. I went inside, locked up, and checked the cameras one more time. The campground was still. The retired couple's fifth wheel had a single light in the window. The Class C to the east was dark. The pop-up camper had not changed. Nothing moved on the gravel roads except the shadows of tree branches in the wind. I set my alarm for 4 hours. I would check the perimeter then, and every 4 hours after, until I established whether the campground's population was stable or changing. 4-hour cycles are sustainable for extended periods. You do not get full nights of sleep, but you get enough to function, and functioning is what matters now. The shore power dropped at 2:14 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was already awake, checking the perimeter cameras on the tablet. The screen flickered once, switched to battery, and held. The house batteries carried the 12-volt systems without interruption. I engaged the solar generator from the transfer panel inside the rig. The transition took less than a minute. I did not need to step outside. That was the point. By morning, I had the portable panels deployed south of the rig, angled for the low November sun. The solar generator needed replenishing, and the grid was not coming back to do it for me. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. No trucks on the highway, no planes, just the fire dying outside and the dog and the sound of a world holding its breath. I lay in the dark with my hand on Shelby's back, feeling her ribcage rise and fall with the slow rhythm of a creature who trusts her person completely and has no idea that the context of that trust has changed. I did not sleep well that first night. I do not think I was supposed to. Day 3 at the fallback position, mid-afternoon. I was working at the camp table under the awning, conserving interior power by using daylight instead of screens when I could. The notebook was open to a fresh page. I had been documenting weather patterns, resource consumption rates, and radio traffic in a shorthand I developed years ago for client fieldwork. It translated surprisingly well to this. Shelby was dozing in a patch of November sun beside my chair, which is her way of telling me the perimeter is clear and she is off duty until further notice. I was writing when she lifted her head. She did not bark. She did not growl. She lifted her head and oriented her ears toward the campground entrance, and her body shifted from resting to alert without passing through anything in between. I set down my pen and followed her gaze. A camper van was pulling into the campground, slowly, The way someone drives when they are not sure they are welcome, or not sure they have the energy to find out. It was a white van, older model, but maintained, with the particular look of a vehicle that someone lives in rather than vacations in. There is a difference, and I can read it from 100 yards. The conversion is more practical than pretty. The tires are all season, not all terrain. The rear bumper has the patina of 1,000 highway miles, not a weekend at the trailhead. The van parked 3 sites away, close enough to signal intention but far enough to respect space. That was a choice, and I noticed it. A woman got out, mid-50s, traveling alone. She had the look of someone who had left somewhere in a hurry, but had the presence of mind to bring what mattered. Her clothes were practical, not panicked. Her movements were deliberate, not frantic. She scanned the campground the way I had scanned it on arrival, and I recognized the methodology even if she did not know she was using one. She walked to my site. Her hands were visible, relaxed at her sides, and I noticed that too. Hands are the first thing I read on a person. Where they are tells you what the person is thinking about doing, and her hands said she was thinking about conversation, not confrontation. She introduced herself as Diane. Former hospital logistics coordinator, retired early, been traveling for 2 years in the van. She had a way of presenting information that I recognized immediately: clean, sequential, relevant. The habits of someone who has worked in systems where clarity saves time and ambiguity costs lives. She said she left her last location 3 days ago because the math stopped working. I did not ask what she meant. I knew exactly what she meant. The math stops working when your inputs no longer produce predictable outputs. When the gas station cannot tell you if it will have fuel tomorrow. When the water pressure drops and nobody can tell you why. When the system that was supposed to function starts showing you its margins, and the margins are thinner than anyone admitted. I did not evaluate her by what she told me. I evaluated her by what she asked. She did not ask for food. She did not ask for fuel. She did not ask for protection. She asked me to help her think. That told me more than a resume. Someone who asks for resources is looking for a transaction. Someone who asks for help thinking is looking for a partnership. And partnerships, in my experience, are the only relationships that hold weight when the ground shifts. We sat under the awning with coffee from my French press, made with water I had boiled on last night's fire and stored in the thermos. A French press does not need electricity, neither does planning ahead. But Diane noticed. I could see her register the French press, the hot water, the solar panels visible in the field, the camera mounted on the rig's exterior. She was doing her own assessment, and I respected that. I asked her what she left with: water, food, fuel, communications. Direct questions, no softening. If we were going to have the conversation that mattered, we needed to start with inventory, not pleasantries. Her answers were honest and specific, which earned her the second layer of my trust. The first layer she had earned by showing up with visible hands and asking to think rather than to take. The second layer came from her willingness to tell me the truth about her position without inflating it. A week of food, half a tank of gas, no satellite communications, which meant she was dependent on cell networks that were no longer dependable. But she had 2 things I did not: a GMRS radio that could pick up local traffic and chatter, and a medical kit that went well beyond first aid, stocked and organized by someone who had spent a career in hospital logistics and knew the difference between what a kit should contain and what most people actually pack. We established ground rules. This is the conversation most people skip in a crisis, and it is the conversation that determines whether an alliance survives its first disagreement. Shared intelligence. Each of us tells the other what we see, hear, and assess. Information hoarding benefits no one when you are both scanning the same horizon. Separate resources. Nobody touches the other's supplies without asking. What is mine stays mine, and what is hers stays hers until we agree otherwise. This is not hostility. It is clarity, and clarity prevents the kind of resentment that tears partnerships apart when stress is high and patience is low. Coordinated security. We split the overnight perimeter checks. Diane took midnight and 4 a.m. I took 8 p.m. and dawn. That meant neither of us went more than 4 hours without someone awake and watching, and neither of us carried the full burden alone. Honest boundaries. Either one of us could end the arrangement at any time, no questions asked. That clause is the one that makes the rest of it work. When you know you can leave, you stop looking for reasons to. I told Diane about my camera system and offered to share the feed. I did not tell her about the spot device, the full extent of my food supply, or the 8-gallon diesel reserve. Not yet. I shared what made us both safer and held back what only kept me safer. That is not selfish. That is operational. Trust is not a light switch. It is a dial, and I have spent 30 years learning how fast to turn it. 1 week in, the campground had gained 2 more occupants since my arrival. The retired couple in the 5th wheel had stayed. They were the kind of people who respond to uncertainty by doubling down on where they are, and I understood that instinct even if it was not mine. A single man in a truck camper had arrived on day 5, parked at the far end of the loop, and kept to himself. I respected his distance. I also watched him from the cameras. You can respect someone's privacy and maintain situational awareness at the same time. Those are not contradictions. Diane and I had found our rhythm. Mornings started the same way. I walked Shelby at dawn and checked the perimeter. Bells intact, paracord undisturbed. Camera feeds reviewed. By the time I was back, Diane was monitoring the GMRS radio for local traffic, catching fragments of conversation from whoever else out there had the equipment and the sense to use it. We shared coffee and intelligence at 8. This became the structure of our days. And I do not think either of us fully appreciated how much that structure mattered until we had it. When everything external is uncertain, the rituals you build inside your own perimeter become the scaffolding that holds you upright. Coffee, information, assessment. A plan for the day, even when the plan was to continue doing exactly what we did yesterday. I spent the working hours on documentation. Everything went into the notebook. Weather, resource consumption rates, campground population changes, radio traffic, meridian status, which had settled into a pattern of roughly 4 functional hours per day, usually mid-morning through early afternoon. I used those hours for critical communications and monitoring. The rest of the time, the dish sat silent, and I worked with what I had. The partnership with Diane was proving its logic. Her logistics background made her exceptional at resource tracking and rationing projections. She could look at our combined food supply and tell me, to the day, when we would need to resupply or adjust consumption. My pattern recognition kept us ahead of developing situations. I read the radio traffic, the campground population shifts, and the road condition reports from the retired couple the way I used to read quarterly reports and compliance audits. Different data, same discipline. Shelby had accepted Diane, and I treated that as meaningful data, not definitive. Shelby is a dog, not a polygraph, but she has instincts about people that I have learned to weight heavily in my assessments, and her comfort around Diane told me something that no conversation could have confirmed as efficiently. The retired couple had approached us twice, once to share information about road conditions to the north, which were deteriorating, once to offer a jar of home-canned tomatoes. I accepted both. Intelligence and generosity are both currencies worth receiving, and the exchange built a small bridge that might matter later. People think survival is about the dramatic moment, the decision, the escape, the stand. It is not. Survival is Tuesday morning. It is checking the perimeter and checking the water level and checking on the person beside you. It is the routine that keeps you alive, not the adrenaline. late afternoon. The Meridian connection was in one of its functional windows. I was using it to check for client emails when the Spot device buzzed with an incoming message. It was from the Nomad in East Tennessee, the woman who had said she was moving south, the one whose competence I trusted because I had watched her operate in the ordinary world, and she did it with the same intentionality I did. Her message was short. They are always short on the spot. Character limits teach you economy. Forming community at and then coordinates. Room for capable people. Verified water source. Bring what you can carry and skills that matter. I read it twice. Then I pulled out the trucker's atlas and plotted the coordinates. The foothills, roughly 200 miles northeast. That was a 2-day drive under current conditions, assuming fuel availability and passable roads. 2 significant assumptions, and I did not yet know the answer to either one. I showed Diane the message. She read it with the same expression I had worn. Careful, calculating, holding the hope at arm's length while she examined the logistics. We sat with it. The campground was stable. The reservoir was reliable. We had a rhythm. The solar panels were producing enough to maintain the cameras and the essentials, and the food supply was holding within projections. What we had built here worked. It was small, and it was limited, but it worked. But stable is not the same as sustainable. 2 women and a dog at a Corps of Engineers campground in late November is a defensible position, not a future. A community of capable people with a verified water source and room for those with skills is a different proposition. It is the difference between holding ground and building something that lasts longer than a food supply. The message came from someone I trusted, through a device I trusted, offering something I had been thinking about for 3 days. Community. Not just 2 of us and a good campsite, but enough people to build something that lasts longer than a food supply. The question was not whether I wanted it. The question was whether the road between here and there was still a road. I did not decide. Not yet. I calculated. I plotted the route in the atlas, measured it against bridge clearances and weight restrictions, and marked the towns along the way where fuel might still be available. I noted the terrain, the elevation changes, the river crossings. 200 miles in a 40-foot rig with a tow vehicle through uncertain conditions is not a drive. It is an operation, and operations require planning that respects the distance between where you are and where you intend to be. Diane watched me work the atlas without speaking. She understood that she was watching a decision being built, not made. Some decisions do not happen in a moment. They happen in layers, one calculation at a time, until the weight of evidence tips the balance and you realize you decided 3 pages ago. Evening. I was sitting outside with Shelby. The fire was low, burning down to embers the way a well-built fire does when you let it follow its own timeline. The camera feeds were live on my tablet, propped against a water bottle on the camp table. Diane was at her van, visible in the middle distance, a silhouette against the blue-gray dusk. I opened my notebook to a clean page and wrote what I was thinking, not the logistics. I had pages of logistics. I wrote what I was feeling, which is something I do less often than I should, and more often than anyone who knows me professionally would expect. Everything that kept me alive this week, I built before I needed it. Not because I saw this coming, because I saw myself clearly. I am a woman who travels alone, works from the road, and parks in places where the nearest help is an hour away on a good day. I built these systems for my life, not for a crisis. The 4-week food supply was a practical decision by a busy consultant who parks remotely. The trucker's atlas was a sensible purchase for someone who drives a 40-foot rig. The 4 charging pathways were insurance against the reality that a solo woman working from the road cannot afford to lose power in the middle of a client deliverable. The Spot device was a communication tool for places where cell service does not reach. None of it was survival gear. All of it became survival gear. The crisis did not teach me new skills. It showed me that the skills I already had were the right ones, deployed in a context I never imagined, and functioning exactly as designed. If you are listening to this and thinking you could not do what I did, you are wrong. You do not need my rig. You do not need my career. You do not need 3 decades of reading boardroom politics to understand when a system is about to fail. You need the habit of asking one question. What breaks if this one thing fails? Start there. Start with one system, one backup, one honest look at what you depend on that you do not control. What happens to your water if the municipal supply goes offline for a week? What happens to your food if the grocery store does not restock for 10 days? What happens to your communication if your phone loses service and does not get it back? You do not need to answer all of those questions today. You need to start asking them. Because the asking is what builds the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is what keeps you standing when the answers change. That is not prepping. That is paying attention. And it is the only thing that has ever kept anyone safe. Dawn. The campsite in first light. The rig solid and quiet against the tree line. The Tahoe beside it, faithful and full of fuel. The solar panels catching the earliest sun, angled low for November, already collecting what the day had to offer. Shelby was sitting at my feet, ears forward, watching the road the way she watches everything. With patience, with attention, without the need to understand why she was watching. Just the discipline of being present. The atlas was open on the camp table. A pencil line traced the route northeast, through the foothills, toward coordinates I had memorized and a community I had not yet decided to join. The pencil was tucked behind my ear, the way it always ends up when I am thinking with my hands and my mind at the same time. I looked at the atlas. Then I looked at the road. Then I looked at Shelby, who looked back at me with the expression of a dog who does not care about societal collapse, route planning, or community formation protocols. She cares about me, and the fact that I am right here, in this chair, at this campsite, at this hour, with my hand reaching down to scratch behind her ears. I closed the atlas. I did not close the question. The story continues whether anyone follows it or not. I am already 3 moves ahead. End of episode 1. Rooted Readiness. An Eddie's on the Move production. Preserved in motion.